Oh my goodness. I get to talk to my friend Urvi. Hi, Urvi.
Hi, Lisa.
I'm so excited to have a soul sister conversation with you. Thanks for agreeing to share your story with all of us.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, it's such a joy. So I want to share, you reached out to me. I was going back to our messages back and forth in January of
hmm
this year, 2023. And can you share a little bit about why you reached out and yeah, wherever you want to kick it off.
Yeah. So I actually reached out. So that's actually when I started IVF. January was my very first appointment with a clinic. And I was actually looking for support because I was part of a lot of different support groups, like Facebook groups and things like that. But like it just seemed very discouraging because everybody's talking about like how their chances are low, or like they didn't have enough embryos, or like it didn't stick, and like all of these things, right? And so like that fear was really creeping into me, and I was like, no, I need to find people that inspire me through this process. And I actually found you through another person I follow, Ashley. So
Yeah.
she had posted about you, like, so she had documented her IVF process, and I was like, okay, let me see what Ashley had. And then she had mentioned a book that you wrote, and then that's how I found you. I also got your book, which I read through the whole IVF process that I was going through.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm so grateful. You had the kindest words to say about how my book supported you. And you're right. Like there are so many groups out there to support women in the fertility space. But like you shared with me, which I am so grateful, like you really put so much thought into your words and sharing like the energetics, and that spiritual support just wasn't, that's not talked about really in those Facebook groups, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the reason why I'm looking for that is because I'm a very spiritual person. I'm an energetic person. I'm a coach myself. And so for
Right.
me, it was like I knew if I was going through this and if I needed to move through it, like my mindset, my energy, and the
Mhm.
spirituality part of it um had to be at the point where I was actually attracting, the pregnancy to come in instead of like pushing it away. And every time I would go on Facebook or, other support groups or talk to other women that I knew that went through IVF, they kept telling me it's hard, it's difficult. Do you really want to do it? And I felt really contracted, right? And I was like, I want to feel expansive doing this. And I know I can feel expansive. And I know that feeling expansive is what's going to make it successful. So I was
Yeah.
looking for resources like that. And I found you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. I mean, you're exactly the kind of woman I love to work with and help, and kind of supported you along the way. Can you take us back? Because I know you were on a long fertility journey for about 8 years, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So
Um,
I've been married for 10. And me and my husband started trying probably 2 years within. And around that time, sex was very painful. And like I just would, kind of push him off and be like, I can't do this. It's really painful. And I had a lot of thoughts of like, what's wrong with me? And I was very filled with fear. And so I didn't want to go to a doctor to figure it out because I'm like, what if it causes pain? Then I was like, okay, let me go. So I went to one gynecologist, and it was very painful for me to even go through like the physical exam that she was doing. And then she's like, have you ever had sex before? And I was like, no, like my husband's the very first time. Like I've been in a
yeah,
long relationship with him.
yeah,
And so she's like, well, it hurts. So maybe drink some wine or do something else. Right. And I'm like, it shouldn't hurt that much. Like I knew within me, like there's something else. Right. And so it took me about, I want to say 3 to 4 years just to find the right gynecologist that could diagnose me with vaginismus, which is a condition that a lot of women have where penetration is painful. So any penetration. So that's,
wow.
obviously sex, but then like even when you go for a physical exam, when they put the speculum in or even a finger. And so I was actually happy that I had at least had that diagnosis. Once again, was filled with fear because my gynecologist was like, you go to a pelvic floor therapist and they'll help you through it. And like I've already been through so much pain, just physical pain, emotional pain,
Mm.
mental kind of trauma as well with this, because at the whole time this was happening, obviously I haven't shared my story with anyone besides my husband. And so my family's like, what's going on? I think that we were in our year 5 of marriage, and within the Indian society, they're like, okay, like expecting to have kids by now, right? And so I felt that pressure as well. And I felt like I couldn't share this with anybody. And so it took me a year and a half to actually go to a pelvic floor therapist because of that fear that I was in. And I was in a lot of anxiety during that time too. And so I used to have panic attacks. There's just a lot that was going on a physical perspective because of all of those emotions that I was carrying.
Wow.
I finally went to a pelvic floor therapist, and she was great. She introduced a lot of the mindfulness practices along with like the physical. So she taught me how to breathe while I was using the dilators. She was like, okay, if you can't use the dilators, like, just try to breathe and like touch yourself down there and see how that feels. She introduced like visualizations, like, so imagine like your vagina being a flower and it's opening up and closing. I started to get into meditation a lot more during that time. And so all of those things, like, she also used a lot of like different physical exercises like Pilates and other things that she made me do. And so like, it was really opening up the pelvic floor, and that was really helping me. And so I went to her about a year. It took a year, and then I was very confident. I graduated with all the dilators all the way up. And I was very confident that I could try with my husband again. And we were trying, and what had happened at that point in time, I feel, was we became very stressed out with actually trying for a baby because it had to be timed during ovulation. And, with work and everything else, it just really stressed us out. And so I could see us kind of like not being interested in it anymore because of the stress of actually trying. We weren't having fun, and we were just trying to do something to get the outcome. And at that time, we had another friend that went through IVF, and they were like, why don't you think about it? At least just go to a fertility doctor. And I was like, well, what do they do? And like, I'm thinking all this, and I'm thinking about like me having vaginismus, and like, how am I going to go through all these exams and do all of these things? And not only that, but then I was also like, no, if I'm going to have a baby, it has to come naturally. Like, I was very much in this thought of like, I can't go through a process where the baby's not going to come naturally. And if I'm not to have a baby naturally, like maybe God doesn't want me to have one. I was like very stuck on that point. So much that I feel like I blocked myself for so many years for actually like allowing that blessing to come in. And so, time went on, and like 2021 is when I was like, okay, like a lot of time has went on. I haven't gotten pregnant. I've tried to do everything. And so I started looking at like other ways that we could try. And so I found like at home insemination kits that, women that had vaginismus were using. I got the kit, and then, my husband was still like, we can try it, but like he was very like distant from the whole idea of trying because it was stressing him out. And then I was like, okay, do you want to go through IVF? I'm like, let's just try that. And he was like, okay, like let's try it. And so at that time we were in Florida, and we visited a lot of different clinics, but I didn't feel so excited about them. Like I don't know, I just did it. And it's one day I was before sleeping, I was just looking at clinics, and this one popped up on my screen. I think it was like divinely sent, actually, because it's the one that I went to. So it was called Kind Body, and they like focus on, giving a different care to women. And so I was like, they didn't have one in Florida, but they had one in New York. And like, we were at that time already thinking about coming back to New York because my husband had to go back into the office. And so I was like, maybe we can try it out. And so I called them. I had my first virtual appointment with them in December. And the fertility doctor that I worked with, she knew about vaginismus. She put me at so much ease. She's like, don't worry about it. We know exactly how to work with it. You're not going to feel any pain. My job is to make this as pain-free as possible. Like, she used all of these words of like what I was looking for in my IVF journey. Yeah. And I was like, this is so strange. Like how did I, but then, obviously, divinely sent to me. So, that's where I started in January. I started there in January. And, at that time, I learned that I had low AMH. So once again, feeling very discouraged about, okay, what's going to happen? But I
what led you to IVF? Was that what led you? Your
No,
doctor
I
said,
didn't know. I didn't know I
okay,
had low
okay,
AMH until I went to them. And then she
okay.
actually called me and she's like, look, like your AMH is really low. I'm 38 right now. And so she's like, if you wait another year or so, it's going to get lower. And so she's like, if you want to do this, let's just do it. Let's see what happens.
Okay.
And she's like, if it doesn't go to, completion, then we can talk about another plan at that point in time.
Got it. Yeah.
But she's like, at least let's try it out. What do you think? And I was like, yeah, let's just try it out. And so I didn't have too many expectations. I was like, okay, like they were able to see like 10 follicles. So maybe I'll have like 9 eggs that they retrieve. And every time I would go, they would see less and less follicles. And like, I would like cry in the car before driving back home. Because in my head, I'm just like, I was so fixated on the numbers because I feel like a lot of like, and that's largely due to the information that I was bringing in, right? Like I was consuming information of like, if you have more egg count, then you're going to have a better chance of having more embryos, which is a better chance of you actually conceiving. And I started to educate myself a little bit more. And so like the episodes that you have with Dr. Green were excellent for me about like egg quality versus quantity. And like really thinking about, okay, like I really only need one to be pregnant. And like that became my mantra. Like every time I would go for an appointment, I'm like, well, do you see one? Like, have you retrieved one? Like even for the retrieval, they retrieved 4, which I thought that they would at least retrieve 7. I was like, okay, at least you retrieved 4. So at least we can get 1 from the 4. And from the 4 that they retrieved, 2 fertilized, 1 went to blastocyst. And in my head, I was like, okay, I have 1. Like I have 1. I was like very optimistic about that 1. It went through the PGT test, came back completely normal and perfect. And my doctor was completely like stunned because she's like, this is amazing. This is like a miracle. And so that's the one we transferred, and I'm pregnant now. I'm 4 months pregnant. So
It's amazing.
It's an absolute miracle, but I feel like what helped me through the journey was that energy, like that energetics that I was practicing, the spiritual part that I was practicing, like just knowing that it's going to happen for me and not living in the fear, but actually living in the love, like just allowing the love to push me through. And I have this necklace that I bought. It says fearless. I bought it before I started IVF because for me, my whole fertility journey has been based on moving through the fear because I was so consumed by the fear and like I didn't take the steps that I needed to because the fear was holding me back. And so before I started IVF, I was like, I'm going to be fearless through this. Like I'm going to do what I need to do and what I need to do. And like, I'm going to push through and it's not going to be painful. And I would talk to my eggs to make sure they were like fertilizing or like they were growing with the medication. Even with the medication, like I heard a lot of people talk about like side effects, and I would just like take the medication and say like, okay, whatever you need to do, you're going to do. Whatever needs to stick to me is going to stick, and whatever isn't is going to like flush out of my body. And I would say that every single time I took the medication or I took the injections, which sort of helped me to be like, okay, I'm not going to go through any side effects. So I didn't really have any side effects, any major side effects during the stimulation process.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm speechless. Like first, I just want to say thank you for opening up so personally, sharing. I mean, this is personal. I don't have the words. I mean, for what you've gone through, your history and all the pelvic floor work you did. And thank you. You're helping a lot of women who may be in a similar situation. So I just want to like honor you for sharing so vulnerably. And yeah, watching your journey unfold and being a part of it, walking alongside you, it's been really magical. And thank you for being a part of, our February gathering. I hosted just like a free gathering of women you participated in, and then sharing with me your transfer was coming up and all the mindset practices that you were doing. Cause I know like you were doing things like I shared with you, writing letters to your embryo. You're like, oh, I've been doing that. I've been writing letters to the soul of my baby for a while. And what other practices, any others that come to mind that you were doing?
Yeah, so before I started on my, on the IVF journey, I was actually going through a lot of like spiritual healing in terms of like womb healing and things like that. And so I found a spiritual mentor who actually, she became my spiritual teacher, where I started to learn how to do this on other women. But she, for like about 9 months, she did a lot of healing on me. And so through that, I was blessed with her kind of telling me practices I can try. So she's the one who actually recommended maybe write letters to your baby, like to the soul of the baby, like it's out there and you can connect with it. And she's like, how does that feel? I'm like, yeah, that feels good. I have a blessing box, so I kept that under the bed between me and my husband. And in the blessing box, I put things like clothes, like things that I just would give to my baby. Just little like mementos and things like that. And I would just continue putting it in the blessing box.
I love that.
And, you know, other than those practices, like meditation was really big for me. I found meditations that were focused on fertility or focused on like really taking away the anxiety or stress of the IVF process. I found a really great fertility yoga channel that focused on like IVF, like yoga for IVF on YouTube, which I was doing that every day. I kept with like my walking and my exercising, like just movement really helped me to push the energy out. And I did a lot of journaling. So like whether it's audio journaling or writing, like physically writing in a journal, I did a lot of it. Like, so I would become very aware of like the emotions that I was going through or the thoughts that I was going through, especially when I was going through those appointments, like every other day and feeling discouraged. I would try to release that as soon as possible, because I knew that if I held on to it, that energy would just, you know, gain momentum and take me to another direction. And so there, and I mean, I will say this, like I was pretty much scared throughout the whole process. And even now being pregnant, like there are moments when I'm like, oh, is this really going to come? Like, am I really going to have the baby? Or like, is anything going to happen? Like, I still have moments like that, but I'm more aware of it and I'm able to like manage it better.
Thank you for just speaking to that, because this is a practice, right? A constant practice, that it doesn't just automatically happen where everything is wonderful and rosy. And it's a practice of like kind of looking at our thoughts and our mindset. You know, you and I really resonated on that quite a bit, and how we can hold space in our heart and call in our desires. But I loved our conversation. You booked a session with me in your 2-week wait to help you kind of stay in that aligned space. And that was something we talked about, was not letting the fear take over, but really to trust in that inner knowing. Do you want to speak to that a little bit about, you know, that everything, you knew that everything was going to be okay. I remember you telling me that you're trusting that it's all, whatever happens, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. So I had a deep knowing that everything was going to be okay throughout the process, but there was still that fear or that doubt that would creep in and be like, do you really know? How do you know? Like, you know, that part of you that kind of just always tries to take you down the other path. And so, especially during the 2-week wait, like for me, it was like, okay, I only had one embryo to transfer. So it felt like the pressure was even higher. And during the 2-week wait, I was like, okay, if this doesn't stick, then what am I supposed to do? Like, I didn't really have a plan B. We started looking at adoption, like like I started reaching out to, you know, different adoption agencies just to see like how long the wait would be to actually adopt a baby. And like, that was something that I was thinking about, but then I, like in my head, I was like, is that really what I want to do? And so I was just filled with all these thoughts. Like, if this doesn't stick, what's the next step? Do I want to go through another cycle? That anxiety kind of was like, I was like, okay, I know I need to release from this. And so I reached out to you to talk to you. And that session was really helpful, because I feel like everything, you pulled that card for me.
Oh my, we have to talk about that.
And so like my whole journey, like I said, has been based on leaning more into the love and letting go of like the fear, letting go of like the judgment, the doubt. And so the whole conversation we had was actually based on that, like that the card you pulled was based on that too. And so
the card, oh my gosh. And the symbol too. I mean, we'll talk about that, but yeah, let's touch upon that card. So I asked you to hold an intention at the end of our call. I said, I'd like to pull a card for you. And it was the father figure of Shiva. And you're like, oh my goodness, I have a story for you. gave me chills. And yeah, like what is the meaning behind that representation? It was an angel card.
Yeah, so Shiva, so I'm Hindu. So Shiva is a Hindu god. And for me, many years ago, like this was before I even got married, I actually went through a really bad breakup. And I got engaged to this person. We didn't, and like I was going through a really hard patch. My grandmother had told me, like, okay, pray to Lord Shiva and things will get better for you. And somehow like my devotion to Lord Shiva just became stronger. It was like, it's like what I needed, like I was always kind of spiritual, but I wasn't that spiritual. And like that just led me on the spiritual journey. And so fast forwarding to IVF, like there's a very big day in February that comes where we celebrate Lord Shiva, and it's called Mahashivratri. And that day, it's like they say, like if you pray to him or if you do certain devotions, like he'll grant you whatever you want. And so I did a prayer and I was like, okay, I just want this child. Like, I just want this to work out. And I closed my eyes and like, I could see him there, and he was literally telling me, like, you need to just be in the love. Like, don't like give into the fear, just be in the energy of love and everything will work out for you. Gotcha. And that's actually, and the card was actually saying something similar. And so since that day, I've every day I would, like in the morning, I would like say mantras that were around Lord Shiva. Anytime, like even like the injections, like if it was, I knew that it was going to be very painful, I would say mantras. So like I would just like be in his thoughts instead of being in the thoughts of like actually feeling the pain. And so he's been connected to our journey. And my husband's great grandfather's name was actually Shiv. So we're actually naming the baby Shiv. That's
you
actually,
are?
So we're going to name him. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So it's just
feeling that. This is huge. Oh my gosh.
It's just like a big, I feel like a big 360 for me. And like just, I feel like he's been, very inspirational to me. Yeah. And it wasn't my idea to name the baby. This was actually my husband's idea. But just the fact that he said that, I was like, it's the perfect name.
That is so special. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
You and I also talked about symbols, and I have a little symbol right here in front of me. For those of you that can't see, a little bunny. And that was really special. I think, wasn't it the day of, tell me the significance when you stayed at a hotel and you saw, talk about that.
Yeah. So when I started the whole process, I actually asked the universe, like, show me a sign, like what sign, right? And the spiritual teacher that I was working with, the spiritual mentor, she's like, bunnies are going to be very, very lucky for you. And so she's like, when you see bunnies, that means that like conception is close and you're going to become pregnant. And I was like, somehow I held on to that idea. I've always loved bunnies. I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so I started seeing bunnies everywhere when I started going through IVF, like randomly, right? And so like, if I felt like the doubt was creeping in or something, and I felt like this isn't going to work, I'd be like, show me a sign. And somehow a bunny would show up, like randomly on my Instagram. These accounts of like bunnies starting to show up. Like, I don't follow.
And when did this spiritual teacher tell you this? How long ago?
She told me in December.
Oh my gosh. And you and I connected in January when you told me about the bunnies, and we looked up the symbolism of what the bunny represented. And we talked about the womb space and the hollow, the emptiness of the desire to be filled. Remember talking about that? And the inner courage, seeing this path through the lens of more courage with love over the fear. And you're like, oh my goodness, the bunny kept appearing along your path, keeping you moving forward and, into the unknown with courage. And you're messaging me like, oh my gosh, the hotel we're at, there's like a bunny lamp and there's white bunnies everywhere.
So we it was actually our anniversary, so we actually took a trip to New York, and that was actually when we were supposed to have the beta test, the first test. And so I was like, okay, since we're gonna have that, my clinic was in New York City, I was like, let's just stay there, so we don't have to commute in. And so we checked into this hotel, and as soon as I checked in, I'm like, okay, there's bunnies. I'm like, okay, April, Easter maybe, right? But
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
they were literally in the wallpaper. And it was like,
Oh my gosh.
it's so crazy. And like, they're like the whole theme was like kind of like this Alice Wonderland theme, I guess. So there's like bunnies and
Yeah.
like forest kind of theme. And
Wow.
as soon as we checked into the room, there was a white bunny lamp, and white bunnies is like the significant sign, right? And so I'm like, I look at the bunny and I just started laughing. And my husband's like, why are you laughing? I'm like, there's a white bunny. And he was like, he doesn't believe in all this stuff. So he was
Oh,
like,
he doesn't.
okay. And so then I told him, like, I'm pregnant. He's like, how do you know? I'm like, there's a white bunny. Like, there's a white bunny. I know. And I was like, we don't need to,
Yeah.
we don't even need to go for the blood test. And so we went for the blood test.
Yeah.
And he was really anxious. And I was like, no, I think everything's going to be fine. And the doctor called us that evening and she said that we're pregnant. And so then I looked at him, I'm like, do you believe in my bunnies now? And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Maybe a theme in the nursery or something.
Yeah. So,
my
I mean,
God.
and even still throughout the pregnancy, I still
Yeah.
see the bunnies, and it just reminds me that, I'm protected, I'm safe, and I'm divinely guided. And so
Yeah.
whatever's to happen, like, I know that the universe has me protected.
That's so beautiful. I'm with you. For those who are listening and maybe like, how did you make the switch? Or was it a choosing? Was it like in your head, I'm choosing to lead with more of the love over the fear? Like what supported you? Or can you speak to that a little bit about trusting in the unknown of all of this?
Yeah, it was definitely choosing. So
Mm.
it started like in my fertility journey before I started going to the pelvic floor therapist, where I was like really consumed with the fear and anxiety.
Mhm.
And I knew that I wanted to live a different way. Like I was just consuming a lot of things, like from what I was watching, from people that I was around, like everything was very fear-based. And I knew I didn't want to live this way. Like I felt like I was literally like choking.
Mhm.
And I felt like very small and insignificant. I didn't feel like I could spread my wings. I
Mhm.
felt like I was like a victim to everything that was happening. And I knew I didn't want to live my whole life that way. And so, just a backstory, like I grew up very spiritual. So my parents are very spiritual. They taught me
Mhm.
meditation, all this stuff. And so my parents would always like tell me like, you don't have to be so negative about everything. Like, like they would try to guide me and I'm like, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but then at that point in time when my anxiety was so bad, I would have panic attacks and just be on the floor. And I would just be like, something has to change.
Mhm.
And I was lucky at that time to have a coworker that was very spiritual. And so she got me into crystals and like talking
Mhm.
about crystals. And she would send me these videos of like spiritual teachers that she followed. And that sort of opened up a different realm for me. It's like I started to remember like who I was. And I started to choose to be in that energy instead of the energy of fear. And so as time went on, I mean, like we talked about, it's a practice. Like I had to practice it. And there's been times where I just stopped practicing and, I went back to who I was,
Mhm.
but now it's more of like knowing who I am at a soul level and just connecting to that. That's more important to me than anything else. And so
Mhm.
every day I wake up, I choose to be in that like love. I choose to be like in that joy. Like
Yeah.
you talked about this in your book about like, how do you find joy every day, even though you're going through IVF? And that was something that really spoke to me as I was going through IVF. Like I started doing things like I didn't do for a long time, like painting or dancing or just like, randomly like watching something that made me laugh. Like I didn't do these things. Like,
Mm.
so for me, it's like every day I choose to do this. Like, this is who I am. This is how I want to show up.
Thank you for speaking to keeping that joy alive. It's so important,
Yep.
We often
Mhm.
get so consumed by this process and just letting, ourselves stop doing those things that light us up. And so painting wasn't something you really had done before. You kind of started doing that then, the art.
Yeah. So I actually stopped doing like anything like creative.
Creative.
I mean, outside of like my business, like creating posts and stuff, but like
Right.
really just doing something to do it in terms of creative. And so art has always been very big for me. Like when I was little, I loved to color. I actually was going to go to art school
Oh.
and I didn't. And so I started getting back into painting, and every day I would just like watercolor, or like, even something as simple as, I have a coloring book, so I would just color in the coloring book, just something that like really ignited that creativity in me. And I think another part of it is like being more in that feminine energy, which I kind of blocked myself of being in many years, because I was constantly felt like if I was going to be successful in this world, I had to be more masculine and be more in that masculine energy of doing and acting and being aggressive and, and all of those things. And so I really shut down the feminine energy within me. And I feel like during the IVF process, I started to get into these things, like even dancing, like things that like I used to do as a child that really expressed my feminine energy. And like I really celebrated that during the process. And I think that really opened up a lot of things for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I resonate with everything you're sharing. You're just like the prime example of like like you're living all these practices that I write about and speak about, and just making the space for the creativity to tap in, for allowing this beautiful unfolding and you have with your one healthy embryo. Like you and I both share that.
Yeah.
I'm just so grateful, like you revealing that you're pregnant and the name of your baby. Oh my gosh. Here, I'm so honored, like truly. Oh my goodness. Wow. I mean, just, yeah. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably. And
Absolutely.
I adore you, and I'm so grateful that we're connected. And I mean, do you have any like kind of last words for women on this path who, maybe they're kind of like curious or seeking like a more kind of soulful approach through IVF, and you're living proof of like just kind of trusting and surrendering, letting go, like going for it. And yes, there's fear, but what would you kind of say to these women who maybe are listening?
I would say the first thing I would say is not to give up, because I feel like and I did this on my fertility journey. I feel like I kept giving up and then going back to it. And I feel like you need to trust yourself, and you really need to trust in the fact that you have this desire to have a baby, and trust that it's going to happen for you one way or another. It's going to happen. I feel like for me, even before I started IVF, I was so fixated on how it needed to happen that I was actually blocking myself. And so the one advice that I would like to say is like not to get so caught up in how, but just really live in the desire of I want to have a baby, and just let that blessing come in the way it's supposed to come in, however it is.
Yeah, maybe it's not IVF, maybe it's another way. Maybe people do give up on IVF, right? Maybe people let go of that way.
And it could come through another way. Like I've heard so many stories of women that did IVF for so many years, and then they naturally got pregnant afterwards. And so I absolutely believe that if you have the desire of something, it is going to come true in your life. It's just a matter of letting it go and allowing it to come in.
Love it. Thank you so much, Urvi.
Yeah.
You do this work too. I know you've kind of shifted and seen a need, right, to support others in this space through just navigating one's path to motherhood. And you are, like, as you said, you're a spiritual teacher and a mindfulness coach. And where are your desires leading to you now? Like kind of.
Yeah. So as I've been on, my own fertility journey, and even now being pregnant, I've seen a lot of women just kind of talking about how things are hard, pregnancy's hard, it's a struggle, and all of these things. And it's like, for me, trying to create a space for them where they can let go of that mindset and allow the mindset of it doesn't have to be hard, it doesn't have to be a struggle. I do understand there's a lot of overwhelm and there's a lot of information that's pushed down on us, especially after you become pregnant. Every time I go to a doctor's office, I'm like, I have to tell my doctor, like, can I record what you're saying? Because I'm not going to retain any of this. And so, she laughs at me. And so, it's very overwhelming, even especially if you're like a first time mom.
Yeah.
And so I've been a spiritual teacher and mindfulness coach for a long time, and helping women all different facets, but I really want to focus on helping those that have are going through a fertility journey, trying to get pregnant, those that are pregnant and those that are new moms now, to kind of help them with these practices, these tools to support them. And I think it's important also for, like, as I'm pregnant, I think about like my baby and how I want to raise my baby and like the things that I want to pass down. And I think that this is important in nurturing that next generation of like actually teaching them that you don't have to be programmed into this fear-based mindset. Like, you are allowed to be more expansive. Like, that's what our true nature is. And so I feel like that's like the next layer, like kind of educating women on this, but like then them actually teaching their kids.
Beautiful. I mean, gosh, you and I are so like-minded and having this passion for supporting women on their path to parenthood. And you're right, it doesn't have to be one of struggle and pain. It can be one of a lot more joy and peace and just kind of more ease through this, you know?
Yeah, and fun. I mean, it's a fun time.
Yes. Where can everybody find you? What's your website?
So my website is www.innerserennitylifecoaching.com.
Inner
And
Serenity Life
innerserenity.com. Innerserenitylifecoaching.com. And
I'll include it in the show notes.
my Instagram is innerserenityLC.
Got it. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so grateful. Thank you for sharing your story and where you're at today. It's so beautiful. I can't wait to stay in touch with you.
You, Lisa. Thank you for
Thanks,
having me
Urvi.
on your show.
Of course. Thank you again. Bye.
Bye.